Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an Institute for the Humanities and Alternative College and High School here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. This is the August 22nd edition of News with the Fetz. We got a extra dose because of some calendar hiccups. We get to go back to back. 2 weeks running looking at geopolitics and internal politics here in these United States. Before I kick things over to Dr. Fetzer and his helpful slideshow, which we'll get on this screen, just one announcement as we enter the fall semester. Of course, we'll let Dr. Fetzer speak about his coming course on conspiracies and critical thinking. Just on my end, just a general thing philosophically as we get into things. At Apocatastasis, all of the staff and students have different ideas and different philosophies and so forth, and we can all get along. And I wanted to thank Dr. Fetzer for his graciousness with quirks and so forth. And that's part of it. If we're going to rebuild culture, if we're going to rebuild society, it starts on the interpersonal. And it starts with, tolerating eccentricities or whatever. So I just wanted to say that that's a good mood as we're getting into the fall semester. What are we doing? Well, we have to learn to hear each other out and to be patient with each other and so forth. And I want to thank Dr. Fetzer for his graciousness when it comes to quirks and so forth and philosophical this, that, and the other. So anyway, that's my announcement. And I kick things over to you, Dr. Fetzer.
Well, John, thank you so very much. And of course, post the Alaska summit, there have been various developments that actually have not changed the situation a great deal. But I would observe right off the bat that the fellow you see there with Donald Trump is not Vladimir Putin, but one of his body doubles. Trump has a couple. I thought it would be highly inadvisable for Putin to come to Alaska, that the risk of assassination was too great, especially after there was what appeared to be a contrived attempt to assassinate Trump by a purported Ukrainian. But what we can see here is this fellow swings his right arm. Vladimir Putin keeps his right arm very much straight, doesn't much move it at all. Here he's being kind of jovial. His gait, his walk, his manner is unlike that of Vladimir Putin, and his expression. He's doing a lot of smiling, a lot of joviality out of this guy that we don't get from the real guy. But that does not mean he wasn't being authoritative and representing Russia's position. Here we have from the Associated Press. No end to Russia's war in Ukraine after Trump rolls out red carpet for Putin. President Donald Trump failed to secure an agreement from Vladimir Putin on Friday to end Russia's war, falling short in his most significant move yet to stop the bloodshed, even after rolling out the red carpet for the man who started it. Well, that's misleading. Actually, Victoria Nuland in the United States started it in 2014 with a coup in Kiev to depose the Russian-friendly president, replace him with a Western puppet of whom Zelensky is the successor. And then, of course, following regime change in Ukraine, there was artillery bombardment of the Donbass, which by the time of the Russian intervention had taken around 2,000 lives of ethnic Russians, Russian-speaker, Russian-friendly residents of the Donbass. And as I piece it together, Kiev was about to launch an out assault on the Donbass to slaughter the residents there, analogous to what Bibi Netanyahu has done in Gaza to slaughter the Palestinians there, which was ultimately what prompted Putin to intervene. And of course, he's done so quite successfully. This idea that Russia's a bad guy is false. It's very clear. Ukraine, which is now has become the proxy of the West, engaging in a basically NATO war against Russia, is at fault. And, in a broader picture, the morality, the good is actually represented in this case by the Russian president, the bad, the Ukrainian. There's no deal until there's a deal, the U.S. president said after Putin claimed they'd hammered out an understanding and wanted Europe not to torpedo the nascent progress. Trump said he'd call Ukrainian President Zelensky and European leader to brief them on the talks. Trump, who for years has balked at American support for Ukraine and expressed admiration for Putin, which I regard as absolutely appropriate, had confidently pledged to bring about an end to the war on his first day back in the White House. 7 months later, after berating Zelensky in the Oval Office and staunching the flow of U.S. military assistance to Kiev, and by the way, John, Vice President Vance declared the U.S. is sending no more weapons or funding to Ukraine prior to the summit. Trump could not bring Putin even to pause the fighting as his forces make gains on the battlefield. He's got the advantage militarily. They're making constant progress, taking more land. Turns out hackers accessed Ukrainian military records and verified that the total number of dead Ukraine has suffered is not just 1.5 million, but 1.7, and that Russia has lost maybe 700,000, somewhere in that vicinity. So 3-1, roughly, I would say, or higher on the Ukrainian side. Trump had offered Putin both a carrot and a stick, issuing threats of punishing economic sanctions, while also extending a warm welcome at Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson, and Anchorage. But, it's a little misleading because Trump really doesn't have any cards to play. Russia has taken the territory. Russia has military dominance. Russia has ample supply lines. Russia has additional fresh troops. Russia has superior weapons. What's going on is really an attempt to gain through diplomacy what they could not achieve on the battlefield. Putin delivered a calculated speech, overflowing with flattery for about 8 minutes, and Trump responded by rambling nonsense for round 3. The clip on Fox described Putin steamrolling Trump. I don't think that's quite right. But here you have Fox News reporter Jackie Heinrich. The way it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem things went well. It seemed like Putin came in, steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say, got his photo next to the president, and then left. Well, that's okay. It's absolutely true. And while they were planning 6 to 7 hours of meeting, it only lasted 3.5, or actually 2.5. And they adjourned before lunch, so they never even had lunch together, John. This is pretty significant. Meanwhile, the reports that Putin, or his double, said something that spooked Trump's team in Alaska, that Trump's advisors emerged from the showdown looking ashen-faced and terrified before lunch was canceled. Now, this is from the Daily News in the UK, which has really, in my opinion, very lively write-ups. Vladimir Putin appeared to spook members of the Donald Trump team after the two met in Alaska Friday, some have claimed. The two leaders hammered out the beginning of a Ukrainian peace deal at the summit, Putin securing concessions on a land swap. That would see vast swatches of Ukraine become Russian. The only relinquishment on the part of Russia appeared to be a few cities, but not Kherson or Zaporizhia, which are in between Donetsk and Luhansk and Crimea. it always seemed to me very, very odd that there would be any suggestion that the Russian would maintain those oblasts because they would disrupt continuity between the rest of the Donbass and the Crimea, which they are not inclined to do. Zelensky is being backed by Keir Starmer of the UK, Emmanuel Macron of France, Frederick Merz of Germany, Giorgia Meloni of Italy, who joined with him in Washington. This was like a follow-up mini summit. Trump posted a dramatic statement claiming Zelensky could end the war with Russia almost immediately and set out terms for the Ukrainians, including giving up any claim to Crimea and forgetting NATO membership. But of course, it's not just Crimea. Crimea already joined Russia through an internationally supervised referendum. There's no going back on Crimea. And frankly, there's no going back on the rest, the Donbass itself, all four oblasts, as I see it. Not going to happen. Zelensky and Trump met. There are many who think, of course, it was rather one-sided on Trump's behalf. By the end of their 2.5-hour meeting in Anchorage, the leaders' parting handshake was less chummy, according to a body language expert. MSNBC host Antonia Hilton suggested that Leavitt, that's Press Secretary Carolyn, looked ashen and frightened after what she'd witnessed behind closed doors as she emerged from Trump meeting with the Russian president. A lot of the press corps was there. They reported in the minutes and hours after the presser that they saw members of the administration like Carolyn Leavitt look ashen, almost frightened after what they had seen behind closed doors. Heisen said on Saturday's episode of MSNBC's The Weekend Prime Time. What did that indicate to you? She asked former Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, a guest on the show. We should all be glad that we did not go to Alaska. McFaul responded, adding, Leavitt's appearance after the meeting suggests to me that this was a bigger disaster than they're leading on to. A lunch of halibut and steak scheduled for the two leaders after the peace talk never took place as planned. The menu was revealed among papers related to the summit, found in a hotel printer 20 minutes from the joint base Elmdorf-Richardson, where the meeting took place. Monica Crowley, who was in charge of creating the program for Russian leader Putin's visit, was left red-faced after the 8 pages, including precise locations, meeting times, and private phone numbers of government employees, were found at Hotel Captain Cook. The menu showed they would have had a starter of green salad with champagne vinaigrette, followed by a duet of filet mignon and brandy peppercorn sauce and halibut. Olympia served with buttery whipped potatoes and roasted asparagus. So it didn't happen. That was the plan. Your thoughts, John, on what I reported here?
Well, first of all, halibut and steak doesn't seem too bad. I'll be honest with you. We're getting up to lunchtime over here on the East Coast a little bit. But and speaking of food, just two minor points and then one more substantive point. Speaking of food and the Ukrainian Revolution, I would encourage everyone to look up a most peculiar photo from 2014 when the Obama people flipped Ukraine, and that is. It's one of the strangest pictures. It's Victoria Nuland in Kiev handing out cookies for their color revolution. John McCain was there. One of the Connecticut guys was there. But that is one of the this vampire, as far as I'm concerned, this vampire of a woman, Victoria Nuland, just handing out cookies like like one of those old fairy tales or something with a witch. But you can look that up for the audience. And then secondarily, yes, the substantive point I wanted to say was we talked last month from when I chimed in on, yes, the human toll of the war in Ukraine and wars in general, and also the political aspect. And as far as the globalists are concerned in their own writings, China, they need to clear the decks for China. But also just culturally with wars between these Slavic peoples, the Ukrainians and the Russians, especially a war as large as Ukraine. These have huge ramifications culturally on the local level, and don't think for a second that that doesn't fit into these monsters' plans as well. When they plan these wars in the Middle East or in Europe, it also wrecks these invisible binds, these ties that bind, the loss of memory, the physical. It's not just the physical destruction. The physical destruction is simply an externalization of a lot of other human damage that goes on, the cultural. So I just wanted to say that as well.
Excellent, John. I appreciate your commentary. Excellent. Meanwhile, Truth Seeker reports Trump's lost cause. Why Ukraine and Europe will never make peace with Russia. This is very disturbing, but I believe it's completely accurate. Leo Holman, don't be fooled by all the positioning and repositioning by America's European partners with regard to the Russia-Ukraine war. A lot has been said over the last week about how much all the parties involved want peace. Whether it's Trump, Putin, Zelensky, Macron, Starmer, Maloney, or Merz, they all claim to want the killing to stop. But actions speak louder than words. Remember that old saying, money talks and BS walks. As a journalist, I learned long ago to follow the money. And I don't see any real desire to permanently settle the score between Russia and Ukraine. Trump may want to end it, but he's kidding himself if he thinks he can. Why? Because he owes too many political favors to neocons in his own party, for whom priority number one is continuing to escalate the war with Russia. War is what makes them money and keeps them in office. It keeps them in office by enriching their donors. At the end of the day, there is a border war. This is a border war between two Slavic countries. But instead of treating it as such, the collective West has been building it into a triggering mechanism for World War III. If we take him at his word, Trump seems to want to avoid World War III, but he's rowing against the tide. All the momentum of the last 4 or 5 years has been in the direction of global war, and it all boils down to economics. And John, if you could assist me reading the next page.
I sure can. Just let me blow this up, Dr. Fetzer, and that'll help my eyes as well.
Excellent.
All right.
Excellent.
Okay, there we go. All right, from the top, here we go. The very fact that European and American governments choose to get involved in this war in the first place tells you that they want a war with Russia on some level. Likely, they want direct war between NATO and Russia at some point. And Dr. Fetzer, just because of the reverb, can you hit mute until I finish this page here, and that'll be better audio?
Oh, sure.
Thank you, sir. But now is not the time. They know they're not ready for that. Hence, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz pushed Monday at the White House Peace Summit for a quote-unquote ceasefire instead of a long-term solution to the war. Trump, after speaking with Putin in Alaska, said he wants a long-term solution, not just a ceasefire. but my gut tells me he'll end up with something closer to a ceasefire. The problem is these globalist warmongers got more than they bargained for by picking a fight with Putin. The results after 3.5 years of a proxy war against Russia have not gone according to plans. Russia was supposed to be greatly weakened and on its last leg economically by this point, but it hasn't happened. Russia, in many ways, is stronger militarily and economically now than it was in February of 2022. They thought Russia would be worn down and begging for an off-ramp on terms totally in favor of the West. Even better, they thought Russia, weary of war, would rise up against Putin. They miscalculated because they don't understand Russia or Russians. At the same time, the neocons in Washington and Europe, in collusion with their friends in the lapdog corporate media, spurn their fantastical propaganda narratives about the brutal dictator in Russia, which brutalizes his own people. He wants to take over the whole of Europe. You want to switch the page there, Dr. Fetzer, or comment? Okay. Keep reading for me. Okay. You just interject when you want. I saw one of these neocons who is very popular in conservative circles speaking last week, saying that Putin plans to invade the Baltics and Poland by the end of the year. He offered zero evidence to support that wildly inaccurate claim. But it lines up with the statements of neocon politicians like Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, Mike Pence, John Kennedy, John Cornyn, and Marco Rubio before he became Secretary of State. Those are just a few neocon names. The House and Senate are full of them. The State Department and Pentagon are run by them. These freaks still live like it's the 1980s in the way they view the world. Putin has held high office in Russia since 1999 and has never showed an ounce of interest in rebuilding, quote unquote, the old Soviet empire. This group of warmongering Russophobes includes basically all of the Democrats in Congress. Yet, we are supposed to believe Putin is still a communist. If he were, why would the Democrats, American communists, have such a hatred for the man? The only thing the Democrats and Republicans agree on is their love for war. Every warmonger needs a bogeyman, and Putin is their favorite character to cast in that role. They will tell any lie to further press their case against Putin and Russia, a country they hoped would undergo a regime change, and they could break it up into 5 or more separate countries that would be demilitarized and reopened for business with the West. If you doubt that this is their goal, go and read the Helsinki Commission's report to Congress from June 23rd, 2022, or you can watch it at this hyperlink. They call this plan, quote unquote, decolonizing Russia. The Helsinki Commission claims to be, quote unquote, independent, but it is a U.S. government agency created and overseen by Congress. You can watch the full hearing below. I wonder what Americans would think if Russians held a government summit against the United States of America. The arrogance of this is mind-blowing. Oh, you're muted there, Dr. Fetzer. You're muted there.
Thank you, John. Trump talks like he wants to pivot away from Europe and its follies, and maybe he does. But I believe that's a strategic ploy more than a serious goal. By getting Europe to put more of its own defense budget and take responsibility for the Ukraine war, that frees the U.S. up to focus more on China and Asia. Even if he wants to, I can't see Trump having the intestinal fortitude to truly ditch Europe and leave them to their own devices, the worst of which is warmongering against Russia. Europe is fast becoming irrelevant in today's world. It has no resources. Its citizens are generally aging, lazy, pampered, overpaid, underworked, and entitled. It all adds up to, and I can't read the words, John, if you can. It all adds up to.
Sure, just let me blow this up once again. And we'll get to the bottom of it here. This is a great little article that you have.
Okay. It actually is.
I can. Okay. Oh, I see. This all adds up to catastrophic consequences for the economy. To become relevant again, Europe needs Russia's vast resources in precious metals and mineral wealth.
Exactly right. In his latest article, economist and techno prognosticator Martin Armstrong sums it up when he says, the EU is looking at war as its only option. Otherwise, the people will be storming their parliaments with this type of massive economic contraction. So if Trump thinks he can go against the warmongers in Europe and the neocons in his own party here at home, he'll find out soon enough that's not possible. Armstrong further writes with regard to the White House Peace Summit held on Monday, Trump met with the European warmongers led by Sir Keir Starmer, the leaders of France, Finland, Germany, and Italy, alongside the heads of NATO, the real leader of the pack, as well as the EU, muscled their way into this meeting. All 7 leaders said they would always be on the side of Ukraine and that the conflict with Russia must end. All my sources have warned that they will stab Trump in the back in a blink of an eye. Trump agreed with the calls for long-term peace, but Europe is not genuine in this regard, meaning not sincere. Europe is on a downward spiral that is only going to speed up in a world run by AI and digital everything. AI eats up a ton of resources, literally. The electricity and water demands of AI data centers are off the charts, unlike anything we've ever seen in history. John?
Great, here we go. The truth is, this was always a war built on a lie. Quote unquote, Russia started the war, being the lie. While technically true, Russia was baited into sending its military into Ukraine, and with a weak Biden in the White House, saw an opportunity to go in and clean out the mostly Nazi Ukrainian elements that were attacking Russians in eastern Ukraine and stoking civil war. This was always a European NATO war against Russia. The history bears it out. But you will always hear that it was an act of quote-unquote naked aggression by Russia, totally unprovoked. Russia just randomly started killing Ukrainians, and Ukraine is the poor victim acting in self-defense. That defies all the facts going back to 2013 and 2014 with the CIA MI6 inspired revolution that installed a Western puppet government in Kiev and began building Ukraine's military into Europe's largest fighting force. Ex-German Chancellor Angela Merkel even admitted that the West never seriously planned to honor the 2014 Minsk peace agreements with Russia. That was only signed in order to buy time to arm and train Ukraine's army to fight Russia. The only way Europe stays relevant is to defeat Russia, break it up into multiple smaller countries, and steal its resources. The problem is they can only do it with American help. We'll see how that plays out soon enough. Even if Trump manages to avoid taking the bait, what about the next president? If the globalists in Europe and Washington get their way and we end up in a direct conflict with Russia, there will be no winners. Satan will have a heyday, and the Antichrist may emerge out of that devastation.
I don't think even with American help they can do it. John, your thoughts? I mean, I think this is why Europe's all in. They feel they confront either political unrest and economic calamity, or they defeat Russia and exploit its resources. I think that is the fundamental premise on which they're acting today. Come what may, it's not going to happen, in my opinion. Even if the U.S. joined in, Russia can defeat the West, including the United States, I think, rather effortlessly. Your thoughts?
Yes, I agree on 2 points. One is in the big picture. If one watches how the globalists act and how they've acted for 30 years, you can see actually globalist sorts much earlier than that. But I mean, look at wars like Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Syria, and a whole laundry list leading up to this Ukraine stuff. If one of the things you'll notice with these people is that they always go hot and heavy in the beginning. They'll never be stronger in their wars than at the very beginning. And they do their, I mean, think about Ukraine, to the audience here and to Dr. Fetzer. Think about how they rolled out Ukraine. Immediately, it was plastered on all the media, all the flags. Even Dunkin' Donuts in town here had Ukrainian flags for donuts, the color scheme. They do everything hot and heavy. They pull out all the banking stuff. They steal all the assets of the Russians in this example. And then the globalists kind of forget about it. If you look at all their wars, now they're not forgetting about Ukraine quite, but they're never, ever stronger than they are at the beginning. Now, as the article said, we're 3.5 years in, so they've lost the momentum. Russia, as we talked about last week, going back to the 1600s, their military doctrine is to slowly ramp up and to grind away. They have a completely different military philosophy there. So there's that. And then the second point is just on the hurdy-gurdy of partisan politics and things. If the globalists were not able to topple, forget about toppling Russia, if they were not able to get the initiative in Ukraine during the Biden administration, which was a total sock puppet for Foggy Bottom and these neocons, if they could not do it then, they're not going to be able to do it now. And I agree with Dr. Fetzer. If they couldn't, the United States, even with Europe and the NATO goons, the United States does not have the stockpiles, the resources. It certainly doesn't have the psychology. This country has fought war since Vietnam, largely by distracting people with the all-volunteer force. The type of commitment, and this is my final point, the type of commitment that the globalists would need to commit America to truly hold in Ukraine, forget about toppling Russia, would involve a draft and would revolve an ingression into the average American's lives that would be very uncomfortable. And for that reason, I don't see these United States continuing this adventure. But even if it did, it wouldn't. There isn't the willpower there. That's the point. And I do agree with you on that aspect, Dr. Fetzer.
Yes. Even if we had the motive, we don't really have the means. Russia has far superior military arsenal. They have better ICBMs. They have better anti-submarine torpedoes. They have better anti-missile systems. They have an effective fighting force the West cannot match. And it would appear, therefore, if war were to break out, it would invariably go nuclear. And there, we have a Princeton study from 2017 showing how it would all play out, and actually basing the origin in Ukraine, coincidentally, so that, really the West and Russia are decimated. Probably 90 million deaths in the first hour. And it's tragic to contemplate. But I'm very sorry to say that appears the direction, the trajectory in which we are headed. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Netanyahu retains his arrogance and his savagery against the Palestinians, threatening to bomb Gaza like Dresden was bombed in Germany. And yet the bombing of Dresden in Germany is classically cited as a historical war crime. Israel's PM, Benjamin Netanyahu, said Israel can bomb Gaza like the Allies bombed Dresden during World War II. So he's grasping for a justification for his war crimes by citing another. But this is a classic case where two wrongs don't make a right. His remarks were made during an interview with the right-wing U.S. network Newsmax Wednesday. When asked why the Israeli military does not wipe Hamas and the Gaza Strip off the map, he replied, "We can bomb them like the Allies in World War II bombed Dresden. We could starve them if we followed the vilifications, these false lies that are delivered against Israel, and nobody would be alive already. The fact is they are starving. It is their deliberate policy." So here you have one of the world's greatest liars historically, Benjamin Netanyahu, brandishing or burnishing his credentials. He added the events of October 7th had involved clear failures and intelligence mistakes. Actually, they did not. We have more and more evidence. The IDF was ordered to stand down for 5 or even 7 hours. This is all permitted to happen. It was a classic false flag to justify the ongoing slaughter of the Palestinians. He stressed that, in his view, the only way to overcome lies was through truth. Of course. The problem is the lies are coming from the Israeli side, the truth from the Palestinian. Turning to the war in Gaza, he claimed the only deliberate starvation taking place is of the Israeli hostages. That's ridiculous. The hostages Hamas has released were perfectly healthy, fit, and grateful for their humane treatment, which they acknowledge upsetting the political leaders in Israel because that's not the message they wanted to convey. He argued this was evidence when comparing the frail and tortured condition of hostages with the welfare state of their captors. Netanyahu said the contrast was intended to expose lies linked to the Eighth Front, which he described as a fight for truth. Ironic from a man who's a consummate liar. He also stated that Tel Aviv did not pursue a policy of starvation, and that it had adopted and continues to follow a policy aimed at separating civilians from fighters on two fronts, meaning West Bank and Gaza. But, John, that's complete rubbish. They're killing civilians right and left. We have all kinds of videos. One recent especially touching, a young girl carrying a bottle of water. Now you're seeing, whoo, a bomb hits. She's gone. She represented no threat to anyone in the world. She was an innocent. Like so many others, her life was taken. Just to show how profoundly the American government is under the control of the Israelis, we now have a House Resolution 8445 that, if it were passed, would provide service member benefits, veteran benefits, for people who serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. John, this is about as disgusting as it gets. H.R. 844, to amend Title 38 United States Code and the Service Member Civil Relief Act to provide for the eligibility of United States citizens who serve in the Israeli Defense Forces for certain protections related to such service. And in fact, we have a new story. Israel wants to start recruiting for the IDF right here in the USA because they're not able to meet their goals in Israel. Meanwhile, and this I think is a perfect exemplification of the lunacy of the neocons, Lindsey Graham God will pull the plug on us if we don't support Israel. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham Wednesday warned, if America pulls the plug on Israel, God will pull the plug on us. John, where do you get these lunatic ravings? Transcript via Mediate. Israel is in a fight for their lives. Our friends in Israel are surrounded by people who would kill them if they could. I'm tired of the word genocide. Let me tell you about genocide. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, they could. They have the capability to do that. They choose not to. Hamas, they would commit genocide in 30 seconds. They just can't. And that's the big difference, folks. Another monster lie, John, just a monster lie. No, can Israel commit genocide? It is committing genocide. Hamas has never shown the least inclination or disposition. To people in my party, he continues, I'm tired of this crap. Israel's our friend. They're the most reliable we have in the Mideast. They're a democracy surrounded by people who would cut their throats if they could. This is not a hard choice if you're an American. It's not a hard choice if you're a Christian. A word of warning. If America pulls the plug on Israel, God will pull the plug on us. We're not going to let that happen. Where he comes up with this fantastic nonsense beyond me, it's pure, unadulterated bullshit. Israel, it continues, is not the bad guy. They're the good guy, getting the parties reversed. The bad guys are the radical Islamists who would kill everybody in this room if they could. Nonsense. We have to give Israel billions in aid, or else God is going to kill us. He doesn't tell us how that's going to play out. That's now the argument. You have to have your brain physically removed from your body to believe the crap that Zionists are now pushing. That's a commentary about what Lindsey Graham has been saying here. Incidentally, if God will kill us all for not supporting Israel, doesn't it follow that those who oppose Israel pose an existential threat? How does Lindsey Graham want opponents of Israel to be dealt with if he actually fears they're going to get us all killed? What should the punishment be exactly? Prison? Death? John, your thoughts?
Wowzers. I often think that the ghosts or the demons that were haunting John McCain have since implanted in Lindsey Graham on various topics, and the Zionism is one of them. Anyone remember when Congressman Brian Mast from Florida showed up on the House of Congress wearing an Israeli military uniform because he's assisted the IDF? I mean, this was outrageous, absolutely outrageous. Right now, U.S. forces are, sorry for cutting you off, Dr. Fetzer, just real quick. U.S. forces are now assisting the so-called Syrian army that they were toppled last year, you know, the Islamicists that were put in as the Syrian army. And what do you think they're doing? They're doing the bidding of Israel next door. So I can go on, but yeah, there's obviously a conflict of interest here.
John, it's disgusting beyond belief. Meanwhile, Conspiracy 101, the course forthcoming beginning on September 3rd. I am a world expert on JFK. I'm also a world expert on 9/11. I'm again a world expert on Sandy Hook for a certainty. I am the only expert in the world on JFK, 9/11, and Sandy Hook. If you want to learn from the best, just take this course. And I say this, John, because at 84 years of age, I have no illusions about immortality. And if you want to take advantage of an expertise that's not going to endure forever, this is the time. And of course, we know we have the schedule out you do these beautiful pages laying out exactly the topics, more about my background, enrollment, with a course tuition of $150 now. I took my wife, my son-in-law, my daughter to lunch here at a local restaurant, and it was like $75. And if we go to dinner, and if we threw in the grandkids, it would be $150 easily. So what I'm not talking about, comparatively speaking, a high tuition rate. In fact, since there are 15 classes, it falls out at $10 a class. I really do believe it's a wise investment. Let me add, I did a recent interview with a UK outfit, Ron Partain, Untold History TV, where I explained how all 4 of the 9/11 crash sites were fabricated or faked, albeit in different ways, and that holograms were employed in New York City. So Ron chose a title. Jim Fetzer, PhD, explained why he believes holograms were used on 9/11 Part 1. And then we had, because this was a very expansive, relaxed discussion, each segment, as I recall, running an hour and a half or a bit more. Jim Fetzer, PhD, explained why he believes holograms were used on 9/11 Part 2. And I conclude by observing that Richard Gage, the founder of Architects and Engineers, and I, the founder of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, and don't be misled, I haven't worn a tie since 1969. I'm going to have a discussion debate about 9/11 on September 6th, 9 p.m. Eastern, that's of course 8 p.m. Central, and 6 p.m. Pacific, which many may want to tune in. RealDealMedia.tv, Dean Ryan hosting. So, John, I just want to mention that for the benefit of your audience, in case they want to pick it up. 2 rather prominent figures in the 9/11 community having a relaxed debate. And it's going to focus on New York and the planes in the city. That will be the focus. John, your thoughts?
Great. Thank you for that, Dr. Fetzer. And I look forward to catching this myself here. Looks very, very interesting. I will put in the description for the audience the class website of Dr. Fetzer. You can see the breakdown week by week of the different topics. And as I've said before, and I'll say again, because at this point we mentioned AI earlier here, and a lot of questions are surrounding schools and what's the purpose of schools in society. And one of them, and I think this is one of the great reasons to take Dr. Fetzer's course and to take courses in general, is that the classroom space is a way to organize information. We could watch videos and news shows all day long, and that has its value. And hopefully this episode was one such. But the classroom helps us to organize a vast amount of material. Look at some of the topics that Dr. Fetzer will be discussing. Organize it in a symphony so that you can see the connections. And also Dr. Fetzer is going to cover logic and logical fallacies and systematic thinking and how to evaluate claims and so forth. So that's another aspect often maybe missed in the hurdy-gurdy of clips and links and so forth. So check that link out and do consider enrolling in that course. And it is not adjusted for inflation, as Dr. Fetzer mentioned. Everything else seems to be going up, but this is most affordable. Breaks down to actually a little bit shy of $10 a class if you were to do the math. So consider that. And once again, I'm very honored to have Dr. Fetzer in this series and then on our collaborator list. This is a great resource we have in his 84 years, and another 84 coming up. So don't you worry there. You're not getting off the hook. So thank you,
Well, it's
Dr.
my
Fetzer.
pleasure, John. I think you're doing a great job, and I enjoy our bi-weekly conversations. I'm looking forward to the course under your auspices, my friend. Thank you so much.
Very good. To the audience, thank you for your attention here. And indeed, Dr. Fetzer, I look forward to seeing you in a fortnight down the line there. Everyone, take care now.